Welcome to the Core Truth. I am Peter Hernandez. I am your host, and today I have Ed Foran from Aspen, Colorado, top Douglas Elliman manager, probably someone that works in the priciest market that we're in here on the show today. So, welcome, Ed. It's really great to have you, and thank you for sharing your time with us.
Eh, You bet, Peter. It's a pleasure to be here, and hello to everybody out there listening in.
So, Ed, you work, gosh, the most expensive market I know. I mean, I think the entry level was a little over 4 million or something just to buy there, and it's a very, very, very unique market, very, very special market. And you know, let's hear a little bit about your background and maybe like how you ended up in Aspen, and we can talk a little bit about maybe some things that even prepared you to manage an office like this in Aspen and Snowmass and Willet Valley.
You bet, Peter. So, so I arrived here in a very circuitous way. I grew up in Chicago. I came from, I was a middle child of a large Irish Catholic family. My dad was a prominent attorney in Chicago. He was a prosecutor. And I just was one of those kids that grew up never wanting to live in the city. And I was bound and determined to, as soon as I was old enough, graduate from high school, to get out of Chicago. Great place to grow up, great education, but just I was drawn to the mountains. And so I went pretty extreme. I applied to the University of Alaska in Fairbanks to go to college
Oh,
after I graduated from high school. And I went up there and ended up studying anthropology at the university there. But also just was drawn. I really went to Alaska more to see Alaska than to go to the university. But I had some great educational opportunities, field work in the mountains of Alaska, and also ended up that transitioned into kind of became sort of a cabin hippie. I was commercial fishing. I was building log cabins. I worked in a gold mine. I lived off the grid for 10 years without running water or electricity. And I had sled dogs. I got very much into dog sled racing, long distance racing. I ran the Iditarod race twice, 1982 and 1984, and then the Yukon Quest, another 1,000-mile race from Alaska to Canada, Whitehorse and Yukon territories in 1986. And I was very, very competitive in it. At one point, I had over 40 sled dogs that I was responsible for, and I loved it. It's my passion. I was finished in the top 20 both times in the Iditarod, and I was on my way up, hopefully to win at some point. But things happened. Got married, had children, and having a dog sled operation is a little bit like having a dairy farm. You can never leave, and all your money and all your resources go into taking care of those animals. And having children changed my perspective. And at a certain point, I realized it really wasn't the most ideal situation. Also, raising a family in Alaska is with young children is difficult because the winters are cold and dark, and it's hard. Can't go outside as easily. The darkness is really more of an issue than the cold. I grew up in Chicago. In some ways, Chicago is every bit as cold as Fairbanks, Alaska, where I primarily lived. So after all this time where I was working in construction, commercial fishing, racing sled dogs, I finally decided to retire from dog sled racing in like 1988, 1989, and I also realized that working with power tools, doing dangerous work outside, building construction was not something that was sustainable over a long period of time. So I thought, well, a nice transition would be real estate. So I got my real estate license in Alaska in 1989, and went to work for a property management company, which was fascinating managing homes and trying to keep them from freezing up when the temperature was 70 below zero. And in dealing with tenants, for instance, I had a lot of military tenants that were working at Fort Wainwright and Eielson Air Force Base that had just been transferred up from, say, Atlanta, Georgia, where it was 80, 90 degrees, and then they go to Alaska and were really in culture shock. So I learned the ropes of real estate and property management, which is a great place to start. And then once I had retired from sled dog racing and given away all my dogs, the draw to stay in Alaska was no longer there. So we looked at other places in the U.S. that was halfway between my then wife's family and where I grew up. So we ended up in Boulder, Colorado. Got into commercial real estate there, 1990. Applied for a job was working in commercial real estate doing leasing and investment sales in Boulder, wearing a suit and tie, gone from Carhartts and grubby fleece jackets and bunny boots to suits and ties and got into commercial real estate and was enjoying it. And I found my experience in construction was very helpful. And then I went to work, applied for a job at the commercial company, and at that time they had a division in Denver and one in Aspen, and I was really woefully underqualified for the position in Denver, and that's what I was applying for. But the Aspen partner was at the interview, and he didn't ask one question of me, and I was convinced he hated my guts and thought I was, an imposter. And so I didn't get the job. The other partner called me and said, "Thank you. You were right up there, but we really needed somebody with more experience." And then Don Fleischer, the other partner, the Aspen guy, called me up 2 weeks later and he said, "You don't need to be working in Denver. You need to come to work for me in Aspen. This is where you belong." And so that was 1993. So I've been here for 30 years now. Started out in commercial real estate in Aspen, transitioned to residential, and so I was in sales the entire time. I was not a managing broker until I was approached by Joshua Sasloff, who had been acquired by Elliman in 2015. And a year later, they were still looking for a managing broker. Joshua approached me, and I had never done any management at all. But I was intrigued by it. And I looked, the first thing I did was look at the roster of brokers that were with Douglas Elliman Colorado. And I knew pretty much everybody on the roster, and I respected everybody in the team. Many of the people that were here at that time: Jen Engel, Marion Lansford, Rafi Bass, Melanie Moss, Joshua, of course, and Michael Latusik. There were a lot of people that I already knew and really, really looked up to. And so after I met with Stephen and I met with Joshua. After several meetings, I was really unsure if this was something I wanted to do, but it came at a time in my life where I was going through divorce. My children my last child was going off to college. I thought this might be a really good transition. And so it's been 8 years. It's been one of the hardest things I've ever done and one of the most gratifying things I've ever done. We live in a market that is ultra luxury. We happen to live in Aspen, Colorado, where it's one of the most beautiful places on the planet, without a doubt. And it has a unique mix of cultural amenities as well as recreational amenities, great restaurants, great shopping. And so we have, there's somewhere between 75 and 100 billionaires actually own homes here. And so the type of transactions that we do are, just for example, last 3 years through COVID, we've We've
Well,
done
we'll
deals.
save some of this. Save some of this.
Okay. All right.
Just save. This is really good, but I want to get to
Yeah.
something else first with you, and
Okay.
that is like how this whole. I mean, I hate to just gloss over the fact that you know, sled drove and you were in races and the Yukon and all this stuff in Alaska, and I imagine you learned a lot from that experience, and maybe even apply some of those experiences to running your offices now. Is that a fact, or?
I think there are some parallels. You know, I had 40 sled dogs, and now I have 50 brokers. So, you know, there's a lot of, you know, and you have with sled dogs and brokers, you have each individual is different, and each has their quirks, and each has their needs, and you know, in racing the Iditarod and the Yukon Quest, the most important thing I could do, the dogs were the athletes. I was really managing the team, not unlike managing a real estate office. And the most important thing you could do was to give the dogs excellent care and nurturing and love, because what they were doing was extremely stressful and hard. And so when you stop, you get your team on a schedule, a run rest schedule that enables them to get you to the finish line in the highest place possible. You are limited in some ways by the genetics of the team, things that happen, nature, weather, cold, all of these things are coming at you from all these directions. And you have to stop and cook for the dogs, melt snow, cook for them, take care of their feet. And you have to keep a very positive attitude, because the dogs will tune in to your attitude. And if your attitude is not positive, they'll get bummed out. And then they don't.
That is so much like running an office, Ed. I mean,
no.
So much so.
Now, these are things that I aspired to do, you know, and continue to aspire to do. But it's really a good metaphor for running a real estate office, is the importance of nurturing, being there. People have different needs. You try to put yourself in their shoes. And, you know, I try to do that. I always feel like I should do a better job. I think it's something, like I said, I aspire to do, but
stop. You're doing a great job, Ed. You're doing an amazing job. Now here's something I want to ask you. You take a lot of pride in running a great office. You want to run a great office. And part of that, Ed, is I think is you're very selective in the brokers you allow into the office. And I know you have a line out the door of people that want to join your office, but you can't accept everybody, can you? Because we're talking about a sled team here of agents that need to work together. They need to collaborate. They need to trust each other. You have to believe in them. Talk to us a little bit about what you think the secrets to running a great office.
Well, I think character first and foremost is the most important thing. Character, integrity, professionalism, knowledge of the market. And, you know, we've had people that came and have left who didn't share those values. And you know, some people may think, well, real estate brokers don't have character. They're just dirt pimps. But I disagree. I think it's incredibly important to have people that are trustworthy, always want to do the right thing, have a great work ethic, are committed to serving their clients, but also being involved in the community. I think we're community members, and we benefit so much in the real estate industry in Aspen. I think it's very important for us to give back. And I think this group of brokers that we have that work with are the preeminent brokers in Aspen. Their knowledge of the market, their work ethic, their integrity, their desire to always do the right thing is I think, which really separates us from the pack.
Well, if I understand correctly, I mean, you're not the largest office in town. I don't think you have the most brokers, like relative to some of the other offices in town, yet you are right up there in production. Can you talk about that a little bit, about where your office falls into the luxury world of Aspen,
Yeah, I mean,
and the productivity of your agents versus maybe other brokerages?
yeah, we have, we're generally around 50 to 55 brokers. Sotheby's has about 200, Compass, not Compass, but Coldwell Banker, about 120. And generally market share, we've been in the top 3, top 2 this year, kind of going back and forth. So really strong for our market, and given the number of brokers that we have working. And
So that's 25%. That's 25%
right.
of what you're right up there with them in terms of volume production. I mean, that speaks so loudly to the quality of your brokers, maybe even the power of Elliman in their lives and what they're able to do, being a member of the Douglas Elliman family. But that's impressive.
It is impressive. And, and I think, the tools that our brokers have, for instance, Ray Bass just got a $68 million listing, that I think one of the key factors in him obtaining that listing was the PR that we were able to put together and promise the client that we were going to deliver on. And Priyanka and Stephen came out, toured the property. Priyanka, she's the best, and put together the most extensive list of publications and media outlets that have reached out to Rafi to put that property out there, which is, doesn't cost him anything and doesn't cost the client anything. We have the absolute best PR team anywhere. We have an amazing marketing department. Mary Pilar, the Western region, Krista Pass is fantastic. And so we have a lot of support, and I think that is key, especially in our luxury market, because these clients demand that they have the best exposure, the quality exposure, and so that combined with the expertise of our brokers makes for a very compelling reason to list with us and to work with our brokers as buyers.
It really tells the story that bigger is not better, better is better.
Yeah, quality over quantity. I think there's a real danger of diluting your brand if you bring in anybody with a pulse, and then the next thing you know, you've got all sorts of problems. And we have a really known quantity here with our brokers, and they have, for instance, I had coffee yesterday with a broker that moved here from New York. She was a broker in New York City and moved to Aspen permanently, and she's with one of the competition. And she assumed, having survived the New York real estate market, that she would just come to Aspen and it would just be a cakewalk. And she said, was I ever wrong? It started with just passing the real estate exam, just having to learn contracts, which you don't have to learn in New York because lawyers prepare the contracts, and just the competition. There's 700 brokers. We have about 490 sales happened last year total in Aspen and Snowmass for 700 brokers. So it's really, really competitive, and you have to have the skill set, the knowledge of the market, and because we're dealing with some of the wealthiest, most powerful people in the world that come and buy homes here. They have high expectations, rightfully so. They expect the best. And Colorado contracts, Colorado deals, they're very consumer oriented. So, a lot of the sellers don't understand why the buyers get a free look. They don't expect issues like having to replace the roof, dealing with mold, water rights. All of these things, our brokers bring their value to the transactions and help make it happen.
So the skill set of an agent is very, very high, but I imagine not anybody could just manage an office in Aspen, Colorado either. I imagine there's skill sets required of managers that you have to possess to run a brokerage, because I would assume, Ed, just like the clients are demanding, I would assume that the agents are demanding because they're feeling the pressure from their clients, and the agents are of such a caliber. And like I've always shared with you, whenever I've gone to Aspen, I always come away so impressed with the fact that whether you're dealing with the server at your table, or the plumber that comes to fix your plumbing, or you're dealing with the CEO of a major 500 Fortune company, or you're dealing with a top athlete in Aspen, it just seems that everybody in Aspen is so dedicated to being the best they can be. I mean, that's the impression I always come away with. And so when you're dealing with those kind of people, they probably expect us to be the best. So what kind of skill sets do you think a good manager needs to run a brokerage in Aspen?
I think first and foremost, you need to listen. I think so much of what I do is listen, and it's not always about real estate. It's because you have 50 people and they have 50 different things going on in their lives. It could be an illness, it could be a tragedy, it could be financial, divorce, whatever. And so all of these things impact their business. And at the same time, they are struggling to make a living and put these deals together. And it's high pressure. The stakes are very high. And I think one of the reasons that helps from my perspective is that I've been in their shoes. I know what it's like, having been a broker for over 20 years, where I lived on, survived on commission to commission. And so I understand what it's like to have that pressure. And so a lot of it is just listening, letting them vent. They're in the middle of a transaction. They have a client that has really given them the heat. They have another broker that on the other side that's not cooperating or not communicating or not returning phone calls. And it could be rentals can be a nightmare. They're probably 10% of our revenue, but probably 90% of our issues that come up. So I think making yourself available, again, I aspire to that. And you're a little bit like a psychologist. People come and they just need to vent, and they need to, sometimes they need guidance, and you just talk through things. And I think most of the time they are able to work out things on their own. But I also have to make myself available. Do you want me to call this broker? Do you want me to call their managing broker and step in? Usually they're like, no. I just need to talk through it. I don't want to cause any problems. And going back to, it's a small town. Everybody knows that you're going to probably run into the plumber that, say, you had a disagreement in or didn't do a good job, or another broker that maybe you locked horns with at the supermarket line. Our year-round population is 7,000 people.
We can't burn bridges. We have to keep the bridges intact, right?
And you have to maintain your reputation. Mm-hmm. People need to trust you. Yeah. So, that's kind of the foundation. I think that you need to listen, be present for them. And I think the team I have here, I really feel like they're more we than I, because I can't.
Well, let me talk about that. I agree.
Yeah.
Because you have a very we mentality in your office. And I think that's around the culture you've built within that office. So how important is culture to a good office?
Culture is because, you know, if you have a culture of collaboration where people can trust one another and share information and raise, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats, you know. But the cliche, of course, that a lot of people use, but it's really true. And, you know, I think real estate industry as a whole, people see themselves as individual. And I've been in companies where you were like an individual silo and people didn't cooperate and share
Everybody
information.
pitted against each other and like,
Yeah,
like
you know, it's
untrusting.
competing and
Yeah.
there's no trust, there's no sharing of information. And I say tear down the silos, talk, collaborate. It just, the more information we share, just makes everybody better.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't make just, you know, you better or that, you know, individual. You know, competition is good, but I find that most people don't like the feeling of, you know, like I'm falling behind or,
Right.
you know, somebody's doing better than me. I think they want to feel like they're all supported and working together towards a common goal.
I agree with that. So let's talk real quickly here. We're almost running out of time. There's two more topics I want to get in, and one is lead generation in Aspen must be
You
much
froze
different
up, Peter.
than, huh? Can you hear me? Ed? Are you still there?
I lost you, Peter.
Can you hear me now? Hello? Hello, can you hear me now?
Well, until Peter jumps
Well,
back on, I'm just going to share some market information so people just get an idea of what's going on here in Aspen and how we are truly in the thin air.
well, I think we lost Ed, everybody. But thank you for joining us for the Core Truth. It's been a great show. We're definitely going to bring Ed back on. Ed is a wealth of information. We're going to cover lead generation and how to be successful in the ultra luxury markets. So we'll definitely do this again for you all. This has been the Core Truth. This is Peter Hernandez. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back next Thursday for another edition.